And we are convened at 8:02 on the 27th. Mr. Montoni, would you please call a roll?
Yes, one moment, please.
Sure.
First of all, I have placed the draft minutes for this meeting in the chat window. Keep in mind that everything that you see there is a copy from last week's meeting, and I'm going to change it as we go through it. This is just the easiest way for me to do it. Mr. Alstead.
Here.
Barbour.
Present.
Benner.
Here.
Bowman.
Here.
Brooksbank.
Present.
Choco.
Here.
Eiler.
Present.
Enzer.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Labrie.
Here.
Leatherman.
Here.
McCose.
Here.
Melchin. Melchin from Nevada. Okay, I'm marking that down as absent. I'm here. Mr. Seebeck, you're here. Scholl, Georgia. Mark that down as absent. Thompson, Florida.
Thompson here.
Wire. Ware from New Hampshire. Okay, let's go through our alternates. Chatterton, Michigan. Clift.
Here.
Edwards. Gonzalez. Lee. Carlos.
Present.
Marinovich. Matt from Illinois. That'll be an absent. Osborne. Redmond.
Here.
Rogers. Romig. Bildoisen.
Here.
All right, and can any guests please name themselves? Do you see any guests, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Larry Silver.
I'm sorry, who?
Larry Silver.
Hey, anyone else?
That's the only one I see.
All right, Mr. Chair, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 16 primary members, and let's see, are any of those alternates serving for this meeting? Clift, no. Carlos, no. Redmond,
I don't think so. From what I'm looking at here.
yeah, it doesn't look like it. Okay, so there's your role.
This is Bill Bergman. I'm here. You didn't call my name, I don't think.
I did.
Did you?
Yes, I did. All right.
Okay.
And I think I heard you say that you were here, and I marked you as present anyway, so you're in
Okay.
good
Thought I
shape.
heard that too.
Sounds good.
All I can say is
Alrighty.
Larry Silver loves meetings more than I do. He comes to every bylaws meeting too. Glutton for punishment.
All right,
He
Mr.
just
Chair,
waits
there's
for
your
all.
roll.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just said, Mr. Chair, there is your roll.
I'm sorry, I still didn't catch that, Mr. Martoni.
He said.
One moment.
Mike, he said that's your role.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
you have
Thank
you have
thank you.
16 voting members here.
All right, confirm that. All right. Okay, let's get to the agenda. You should be able to see it on the screen. Next item is public comment, and the public at the moment is Mr. Silver. Do you wish to say anything, sir?
No, thanks.
Any members of the committee for public comment?
Are you sick, Mike? You sound different.
I'm breaking in a new computer with a different headset, and I'm also feeling a little off right now tonight just because of some physical issues going on.
Okay, well, I hope it clears up.
Yeah, so do I, believe me. So I do have one piece of public comment. I'm going to put Ms. Harlos on the spot for a minute.
Uh-oh.
No, I just want you to show everybody on camera your gavel, your new gavel.
Oh, I don't have it right here. It's downstairs.
Oh man.
Oh no, wait a minute, wait a minute. It is up here. Hold on. But I got something that's gonna infuriate you. It turns out when PSA, so here, this one's even nicer. It's not quite as heavy, but I love this striped gavel. TSA, when they confiscated the last one you gave me, it turns out I had a second one in the bottom of the same bag that they didn't take
Are
because
you freaking kidding?
it's been in there the whole time and I didn't realize it because it was at the very bottom. But when I had to go through security to hear RFK Jr. again, their security found it. They like, do you have a hammer in here? I'm like, and they didn't take it either. I'm like, no, I'm a parliamentarian. It's a gavel. They're like, oh, okay, cool. But it's been in that bag the whole time through multiple plane trips.
Was that the
So
acrylic one?
no, it's another wooden one. It's just one that I've had.
Oh, geez.
Not a fancy one. That's probably why they didn't take it. But just as big. That acrylic one's much smaller, but just as big. But yep. So I figured that would infuriate you.
Damn Nazi Smurfs. Yes, I said that. Okay, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Matz just joined us. At 8:10. So
I'll note that Mr. Bowman's gavel is bigger than my own.
but not intending to have a gaveling measuring contest here, folks. But I can honestly tell you that Ms. Harlos's one is a little larger than the average gavel. You're muted, Karen.
I was gonna say
That's fine. Let her stay muted.
I like big gavels and I cannot lie.
So if Mr. Bergman, the Illinois delegate, is not present, I'm happy to serve as alternate. Mr. Bergman had an injury and had some surgery. I'm not gonna
He's actually here.
divulge too much. Okay, well, great.
All righty. Any other public comment? And thank you for the indulgence, Ms. Harlos. Okay, hearing none. Next item on the agenda, approval of minutes from the January 30th and February 6th meeting. Has everybody had a chance to look them over and submit any corrections to the secretary? Right, is there Is there any objection to approving those minutes? Hearing none, they are approved. So, quick point of personal privilege. Just a general question for everybody. Is my volume okay for everybody hearing me?
It's a little
Yes.
low, but it's mostly all right.
Okay.
I
It's
would
a
say
slight-
on my end.
It works good. I must say, more than your volume, Mark Montoni's volume is so much better this time.
Alrighty.
And
So,
I'll
again-
just I'll point out the probably elephant in the room. You sound like you have a lisp with your new headset. I'll just
Interesting.
flatly say it.
All right. Well, that could be the headset itself.
I just private messaged Mike that.
Okay. No offense taken on it. I'm still trying to figure this new rig out. So, hopefully, you'll still be able to comprehend what the hell I'm saying too.
We can. It's just it's odd hearing you sound so differently. That's all.
Okay. Well, please, if necessary, ask me to repeat myself. I will do my best. Alrighty. We are on to new proposals. The first one on the pile is the proposal by Mr. Alstead to delete the 210 plank for sex work. And I had a substitute for that as well. So for the moment, I am going to change the chair to the proposal. So one moment. Where did it go? That one. This is so much easier with multiple screens. All righty, can everybody see the proposal on your screen?
Yes.
All righty. I'm going to ask Mr. Alstead to speak to it for hopefully a little more than a minute while I'm going to go grab my other headset real quick. Mr. Alstead, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. Yeah, pretty simple. I really got no problem with the plank itself. I mean, if anything, it's too milquetoast. I mean, decriminalization, I think we've seen still allows a black market and still has many of the same drawbacks as outright illegalization. However, I just don't see that this is important enough to get its own plank. We've only got, everything. Our platform is very succinct, and it shows these are the that we find the most important. And I don't think sex work on its own, it's one of many sort of victimless crimes, and there is a section on victimless crimes that already covers this. And I think that is the appropriate amount of attention we should be giving it. I know there's a way to delete planks with tokens and stuff. I just, I'm going to be way too busy during the convention to be running around trying to get people, get people to put tokens in the thing. I just don't think that's an effective way to do it. I'd rather have the platform committee have their stamp of approval on this proposal.
Alrighty, I'm back. Can everybody hear me okay on this headset?
Yes.
What's that? Do I have a list now?
Sounds the same to me.
Okay.
Yep, sounds the same.
Alrighty, maybe it's just me mumbling a little bit. Okay, I'm not sure which order the hands were popped, but I see Mr. Benner, Miss Harlos, and then I believe Mr. Barber. So I'm
Okay.
going to take them in that order, unless somebody wants to correct me on that order.
I will
Miss-
be a
and Miss Eiler.
gentleman and let Miss Eiler go first. I think we were tied, actually.
Alrighty, we're just going to go down the pile here then. Mr. Benner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to speak in support of this amendment. In addition to what Mr. Said in regard to victimless crimes, indeed, we do have a great section on that that articulates it in 1.7. We also have a section on self-ownership, and the ability to do what you want with your body is covered under self-ownership as well. So I honestly think it's kind of superfluous. It ends up kind of being a wedge issue that divides libertarians against each other. I don't believe in criminalizing it, like I'm sure almost like basically all of us don't, but I would speak in support of it. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Carlos.
Yeah, I wasn't particularly thrilled with it when it passed and it was on my watch, but of course it passed out of committee. And also I think the language doesn't really fit with the rest of our platform. And one reason for that is, and I know we like to do this, and I know it feels great to do this, but I don't ever think it's a good idea when we go, well, we're going to get someone from this special interest group to write the best language. Well, they're only caring about their one issue and not how it fits in with the rest of our platform. Just saying in general, we tend to do this every term, and I would highly suggest not doing it. We can hear the concerns of a special interest group, but then we need to craft the language because this language just doesn't fit. And we already do cover it. I mean, specifically, repeal of all laws creating crimes without victims, blah, 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 blah. But part of the blah, blah, blah includes consensual transactions involving sexual services. I think that's a much better way to put it that doesn't single out that one thing and make it sound like we're going, woo, hookers and blow, because this just seems to me like a hookers and blow plank. And if we're going to have one called sex work, I want it to be called hookers and blow. I mean, if we're going to have one, let's call it what it is. So I'm totally in favor of deletion. However, I have a favor that I hope somebody does move if this makes it into a report, because there is a mechanism for delegates to delete. I would ask, because I saw how angry people got in the past, that if this comes up for deletion via a token vote and fails, that we don't try to do a second bite at the apple, we just skip it. People at convention get really, really angry if something already came up for a vote once, and then then the platform committee tries to get a second bite at the apple. People got really pissed off at that in 2016. So if it comes up for a deletion vote, let those tokens fall where they may. But if not, then we have a proposal for deletion. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Harlos. Ms. Eiler.
Well, everybody covered what I was going to say pretty well, especially Mr. Benner. But I want to say that the bulk of my work, both with the Libertarian Party National and with my state, which is the largest region, it's the only state that is its own region, California. I have 30 years in marketing, and most of the work I do centers on marketing. So I'm the one that's working to try to bring in new people, new blood, new donors. And this specific plank is the one that sticks in people's craw and keeps them away from helping us very often. They can work their way into it in the other sections of the platform, and most of them get there. But because we call this one out specifically, it tends to be problematic. Many of you probably remember when you were a new libertarian, it takes some time to wrap your head around the reasons behind all of these wonderful things in our platform. It doesn't just, you don't just boom, a light bulb goes off. It takes some time to get all of the pieces. And if we're calling out this very controversial thing, and like Karen Ann said, it doesn't really fit with everything else, it just becomes problematic, especially from a marketing perspective. And for me, I really care about growing the party. That's my primary focus. And I would ask that we delete this. So I'm appreciative that Mr. Alvstead brought this up. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Eiler. Mr. Barber.
Well, just to add, I guess, or pile on, yes, I have decided I was going to be in favor of this. I was reluctant to see this withdrawn initially until I went back and reviewed the 1.7 that's called out, and saw, yeah, it really does actually take care of what's needed to be said there. The reason I was concerned about it is even just within the last week, I see people, libertarians on libertarian channels, Facebook pages, etc., saying that prostitution must remain illegal and all prostitutes are victims of a crime and yada yada yada, all that kind of stuff. That you can't possibly voluntarily be involved in prostitution. You can't voluntarily be a prostitute. Well, obviously, we all know that's wrong. So that was my initial concern, but like I say, after reviewing 1.7, then yeah, I agree. It's just kind of redundant. Thanks.
Mr. Tolko.
Okay, so first I have a question. Am I correct that there's a substitution going to be offered separately for this plank?
I was originally tailoring the idea of having it as a substitute, but it may also be a better approach, I believe, on a little bit of retrospect here, that the substitute I would propose would not necessarily matter if we decide to move to delete the proposal, the plank itself. Just to elaborate a little, the substitute would have put an explicit line in here regarding human sex trafficking. I do believe that needs to be somewhere in our platform, and I thought this was a good place to put it. But I put myself in the queue to speak that a little more in a few moments. Mr. Chalk, do you have any further?
Yeah, I want to speak to this, but I still want some clarification there. So if we decide to delete this right here, you will withdraw my substitute. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I will be voting against this motion. I, to some extent, agree with the idea that it's redundant. But you could say that about essentially any issue in our platform. Why do we call out immigration or free movement of goods across borders? It's obviously libertarians support those things, but they're issues that people talk about, that people think about, and it makes sense to call some of these things out by name. This one in particular was added fairly recently. So the delegates, the members of the party that we represent, just put this thing into the platform a few years ago. And I've seen no reason to think that the party's collective mind has changed on the idea of sex work. So it seems kind of, I don't have a great word for it, but it doesn't seem to make sense to me that we would just turn around and take it out a couple of years later. So, and also a few people have mentioned this idea of this being a turnoff. I mean, I take you guys at your word, but it's hard for me to imagine how somebody that's seriously, even remotely libertarian would not support this fairly milquetoasty, easy position on sex work here. This is not an extreme position. It's not hardcore enough by libertarian standards. So I just have trouble with that argument. Anyway, I guess that's it for the moment. I will be voting against deletion.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Choko. I have the following order. Excuse me. I have Mr. Brooksbank, Mr. Bowman, myself, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Montoni, Mr. Ensor, and then the second round with Ms. Harlos, Ms. Eiler, and Mr. Alstad. So, Mr. Brooksbank.
Yes, I will be voting against the deletion. As Mr. Choco said, there are things within our platform that we need to point out and address specifically. And I myself have actually pointed people to this plank numerous times. And so I would definitely be against deleting. Thank you.
Mr. Bowman.
One of the kind of shorthand ways of describing libertarianism for, especially when you're speaking to a public crowd that hasn't been well versed in meanings of phrases like non-aggression principle and, initiation of force and all those kind of phrases that we all understand. One of the common kind of short, identities of libertarianism is we're for keeping government out of the bedroom and out of your wallets. And this plank here kind of encapsulates both, because obviously it's dealing with sex and it's dealing with money. And I think it's important to have it set aside along with a whole bunch of other proposals. It's not like we're putting this above any other, law that needs to be changed. It's one of many. But enumerating it makes it clear. It's not, otherwise it seems almost hidden in that 1.7. It's kind of buried in there, and people wanting to look for a view on prostitution, unless they know about searching documents using software, may not find it without having to read through the whole thing. And just to add on to that, we do have the token process, and it seems kind of redundant to me for us to be doing any deletion proposals at all. I mean, maybe it's because I personally like our platform, and where I don't like it, I don't think it's strong enough on an opinion. So the idea of, deleting it on our own rather than just letting the token system do its job if people really don't want it, counts to me. As far as it being controversial, I think before I was a libertarian, I always thought it was ridiculous to have laws against drugs and prostitution. It's like, I always thought to myself, why is it anyone else's business what people put in their body? I couldn't be sold at the time on things like, complete lack of economic help by the government. I couldn't sell myself to, sell myself. I couldn't get myself, so-called wrap your head around, as some people say now, a lot of the other ideas of libertarianism before I really read Ayn Rand and stuff. But prostitution, drugs, no problem. And I remember people used to rip on the fact that we were going all around, talking about legalizing weed all the time, that was a turnoff, and that would turn people away from the party. And as you see right now, it's a majority issue. It's mainstream. Probably more than half the states, or a good portion of them anyway, have legalized weed. Mine has. People in the state used to think it was a big turnoff, that it was just way too fringe. So no, I say let's be the the knife edge there. We're cutting edge. We're moving forward. We're leading the pack on liberties, and maybe prostitution laws are the next thing to fall.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. I'm going to speak next on this, real quick. This was passed originally in 2018, as was noted in the chat, and one of my early days in the party, this was about 2002, roughly, in Colorado, we had one of our party members on one of the local radio stations talking about prostitution. And this was a mother of two children, married, Air Force veteran. And at the time, I was driving into town from my work when she was on the air. I was listening in, and caller came on and authenticated the party stance about this. And she had the best comeback line and hit that I've ever heard. She said, "Well, what don't you like, the sex or the money?" I almost wrecked my car. I was laughing so hard. I think that sums up the nature of the plank in a simple terms. That being said, there have been references in the chat to the plank 1.7 regarding the consensual actions revolving sexual services. It is in there. It reads, "We favor the repeal of all laws creating, finger quotes, crimes without victims, such as gambling, the use of drugs for medicinal and recreational purposes, and consensual transactions involving sexual services." So we've already kind of got it in there anyway. So it is kind of redundant in that respect. I'm not taking a necessary position one way or the other about it, but I will clarify two things. One, the substitute I was going to propose for this would have had added a line to this that says we oppose human trafficking. That to me right now is it's a large issue going on because of what's been happening with the situation at the border, as well as other issues going on in the urban world. That sentence would have read, "We reject human trafficking and involuntary sex slavery as violations of individual freedom." Short, sweet, and to the point. If we move to take this out, that becomes a moot issue for this plank. But I think we should figure out a way at some point to put it somewhere else. I think we need to take a very vocal stand on that specific part of this, because there's a lot of arguments I hear on the world on this that they say, well, you're in favor of prostitution, therefore you're in favor of underage sex trafficking. It's like, no, we're not. But people assume that because they don't do their research and they make an assumption that the two are necessarily joined at the hip. So I'm going to ask the committee to keep that in mind a little bit here, but I'm not saying to vote yay or nay on this. I'm just saying let's keep that thought in the back of our heads for contemplation and sorting it out. I have Mr. Johnson, Mr. Montoni, then Mr. Ensor. Mr. Montoni, Ms. Tewksbury just entered as a guest. Let's see, I'm double checking my list here. Okay, Mr. Johnson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to empathize a little bit with Ms. Eiler's comments about how this can impact people on their journey in libertarianism. I will make a shameful confession that when this passed in 2018 and I was watching and I was much newer to the party, I looked at this and thought, this is embarrassing. This is not going to help us. At that time, I was in an area where we had a lot of Republicans we had to try to get on board because it was in a heavily blue state. I've learned since that time. For one thing, on this committee, I'm not representing my personal opinion. I want to represent the views of the party and the interests of the party. And in Texas, we've seen a lot of success with actually even running fundraisers on this issue. I've found since that time and learned that a lot of the people who are opposed to this are generally sex negative, are very, very loud. While I found that the people who are with us on this are the vast majority. When I go out on social media as pages, as a libertarian page, and I post on news articles related to sex work, the overwhelming consensus I get from normal people is agreement with our position, which is hard to do a lot of times with libertarian positions, but this is one position where I've consistently seen positive signal, which tells me that we are similar to the position on cannabis legalization. We are firmly in the mainstream view with this position as things are today. There's a lot of pushback against this position from people who will never empathize with this position. So I think from that perspective, I don't see a lot of value in removing it. I agree a lot with all the other points that, hey, we already have a mechanism for this. And I just don't think this is a priority for delegates this year, especially when we just added this a few years ago. So I'll be voting no on removal. Thank you.
Come on, Tony.
Yeah, I just wanted to address a couple of things here. The purpose of an ideology is to appeal to those who already are convinced of that ideology. We're not after the man in the street. We're not after the drunk sports bar dad or the Valium popping soccer mom, or that's not who we're after. We're after that guy who's listening to our candidate in the back of the room and his hair bursts on fire because he's thinking, wow, that's the first time I've ever heard somebody else saying this thing that I've had in the back of my mind all these years. That's what we're addressing, or at least that's what it should be. We should be addressing in our platform. We want to get to that one guy who's already convinced, or the one woman who's already convinced. Also, I was just going to point out that if this belongs elsewhere, then this proposal should not be to delete, it should be to move the language instead. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Montoni. I have Mr. Ensor up next, but Miss Cliff has not spoken yet and has raised her hand, so I'm going to put her in the queue behind Mr. Ensor, but ahead of second round from Ms. Harlos, Ms. Eiler, and Mr. Alstad. So, Mr. Ensor, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So first off, I just want to point out that this plank was first added, as you mentioned, in 2018, 6 years ago, in New Orleans. That was my first national convention with the party. And something to remember is that Nick Sarwark was handily reelected to his last term as chair at that convention. So I would very seriously challenge the assertion that the party has not changed significantly since then. And then as far as the plank itself, I'd like to point out that this sex work is one of just a multitude of different work that people could do to earn a living that the government criminalizes, restricts in various ways. But why isn't farming in there? Why isn't manufacturing without government approval in there? And I would simply point out that there's a whole multitude of different ways that people could earn a living, but it's this specific one that is highlighted, and I think it's for the cultural wedge aspect of it. So I would say that, as was pointed out before, it's not only is our stance on it not just implied by other areas of the platform, but made clear in other areas of the platform, but that it is a net negative for that reason. And that's not to say that people can't, raise fundraisers on our stance on this issue, because again, I don't think anybody disagrees or takes issue with the stance itself. It's just the idea of the platform is our overall hitting the high points of what we prioritize. So what is it implying when we have this specific one as such a high priority? And that's it.
Cliff.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I was there in 2018. I think we're missing, and I really appreciate what Seebeck said just now about the sex trafficking. There's a huge disconnect here. This plank belongs in the economic liberty section of our platform. Everybody's referring to the first section of our platform, and that's about individual liberty, about personal liberty. Yes, a man has the personal liberty to go see a prostitute. He shouldn't get arrested for that. All right? We believe that. Okay. Women should be able to do whatever work, women and men, because there are male prostitutes, should be able to do whatever kind of work they choose to do, and not have any restrictions from the government on that kind of work. The only thing that we would say is we might want to add a sentence about the sex trafficking, and I put all my comments in the chat. I don't want to belabor this, but this belongs in section 2. It's about economic liberty, and it's very important to have something like this in here. Thank you.
Okay, we are into the second round of people. So I have Ms. Harlos, Ms. Eiler, and then Mr. Alstad. Ms. Harlos.
Okay, I'm going to try to go through things quickly, because I don't want to start getting redundant, but just to add some echoing voices. I don't see any reason to highlight this. We are talking about such a minor wedge issue. If we're going to highlight an issue. Even I'll get to the economic thing in a minute. I think drugs are a much bigger issue. That if we're gonna highlight a specific one, it should be drugs and not sex work. Everyone keeps talking like if we take this out, somebody is typing so loud, like they need to probably mute. It's already mentioned in 1.7. So taking this out doesn't say we don't support this. It just means that we don't need to highlight it specifically. I don't think it's some kind of cultural zeitgeist. I think we're to coin a phrase, huffing our own farts to think that this is a big issue in general in this country. It's not. Drugs are a much bigger issue if we're going to pick something to highlight per capita. One thing I will say though, if we do propose deleting it, I really suggest we do not use that language in benefits to say as a self-professed libertine in the room, I don't like being called a worse stereotype. I think that libertarianism implies the freedom to be a prude and to be a libertine. Just like we didn't think we should be calling out, thought crimes with the deletion of the irrational and repugnant thing. I also don't think we should be making these kinds of judgment calls. We are a political party concerned with laws, not making necessary judgments on what people support or they don't support. I did not just saying, and that we need to be careful with that. I realize that the party's gotten a bit more culturally conservative, but not everyone is that way, and we need to be careful with that. I agree with some of the other statements said before. Our platform is not a marketing device. Anyone who gets turned off by something on our platform, and I said this about the abortion plank too, they're probably not a good fit at this time. However, pulling this out separately does have a bad marketing aspect because it's in so much isolation that it doesn't give the new reader the reason why we support this. It's just like, again, it just is like we're going woohoo hookers. Whereas in 1.7, there's a logical buildup as to why we hold to it. That's why it fits better in 1.7. I with all due respect to Mr. Bowman, someone in the modern age who doesn't understand how to search probably isn't considering changing to a radical political party. Okay, if they don't know how to search, like we're talking about grandpa who's probably, they know how to search if they want to know our position on prostitution. As far as it being already available through tokens, I will remind everyone that that is a suspendable convention rule. There's no guarantee we will have a token deletion vote. At any convention, that can be dispensed with. So if there is a plank we think should be deleted, we should put it in our report, but just be willing to forego it if it does end up getting through the tokens. But there's no guarantee of tokens. So I don't think that should be an excuse for something not to delete it. As far as bringing up that Mr. Sarwark was elected overwhelmingly at 2018 as proof that the party has changed, no, I think that's proof that Mr. Sarwark changed. Because I served with Nick in 2016 to 2018. And whether people want to hate me for this or not hate me for this, everyone knows I'm not a current fan, but he was a very good chair during that time period. He deserved to get overwhelmingly elected in 2018. I try to keep a reputation for being fair, even to people I don't currently like. Lastly, Ms. Clift had a good point about us looking at the economic section. I don't think moving this to the economic section is the answer. I think maybe we need to look to see if we need to have an equivalent catch-all plank like 1.7, but dealing with the economics of drugs, of gambling, of sex work, or of anything else in there that has an economic aspect as well as a personal freedom aspect. So maybe there needs to be a new plank in economics that also deals with this as part of a laundry list, not called out by itself. But I think Ms. Cliff made a good point there. And I'll shut up now, and I'm sure there was much rejoicing.
All right, before Mr. Alston, I'm gonna interject real fast. It is the chair's position that if this plank get tokens to be heard for deletion, and it does get deleted, that this becomes, and this goes in our report, this would become a moot point. If this is in our report and it gets tokens and it is not deleted, then the chair will not propose this proposal because the part, as was mentioned by the double bite of the apple, it's already been rejected as being deleted. If it doesn't receive tokens, then this proposal, if it goes in the report, I would present it to be in order, just to lay out the options. And I also want one point of clarification: 2.10 is in the economic liberty section already. Mr. Alstead.
All right. Yeah, thanks. I just want to respond to a few of the arguments from some of the people who were against it. Someone said, since we all agree with this, why not keep it? And my answer is we only have 30 planks. They should list the 30 things that are most important to us. And I just don't think sex work makes the cut. Yeah, another issue with the tokens, Ms. Harlow's pointed out another one is there's no debate on the things with tokens. So I think I always prefer to have debate and let the delegates, at least have a chance to hear an argument on both sides before voting. Libertinism, yeah, when I originally wrote this, I said it fed into the stereotype that we're incels. But so I guess I wasn't trying to put down libertinism. I'm not like a particularly morally conservative person myself. I guess I would say it's people who it's a stereotype that we put libertinism as more important than the personal responsibility that comes with being able to do whatever you want. That we want the fun we want the drunk without the hangover, that sort of thing. Oh, and then finally to Ms. Harlow's, no, I don't hate you for your views about Nick Sarwark. I mock you for your views about Nick Sarwark. Thank you.
All right, let's try to keep it not getting personal, folks. Is there any further discussion on the proposal?
I would like to say that if we're going to keep this in, if we don't vote to delete 2.10, I definitely like it better with your amendment because it at least gives people a little bit better context.
Thank you, Ms. Tyler. We'll take one thing at a time here, but I appreciate that. Any further debate on the proposal? Since there's very clearly division going on here, we will move to a vote on this. Mr. Secretary, whenever you are ready.
Sorry, I went away from the computer for a moment. One moment, please.
Right ahead.
Mr. Alstead.
Aye.
Barbara.
Yes.
Benner,
Yes.
Bergman,
Yes.
Bowman,
No.
Brooksbank,
No.
Poco,
No.
Eiler,
Yes.
Enzer,
Yes.
Johnson,
No.
LeBree,
Yes.
Leatherman,
Yes.
McCose,
No.
Melchin. I'm sorry, not here. He's not here. I'm going to skip myself. I'm going to skip Mr. Seebeck. Thompson.
Yes.
All right, I believe that's it for voters. Mr. Chair, what is your vote? I'm going to vote no. And Mr. Chair, what is your vote?
Ooh. What are your numbers?
I see 9 aye and 6 nay.
Chair will not be voting. I asked because I miscounted. I wasn't sure. All righty. Chair is not going to vote on that, so by 961, this passes. So just bear with me one moment here. Making a note to myself here in the agenda so I can keep track of this. All right, and with that, I will not be proposing the substitute. But I will again, I will ask people to keep it in mind. So the next one on the agenda is the intellectual property plank. And I need to share that real fast. Where did it go? Where did it go? There it is.
I see it on the screen.
Okay, yeah, good. All righty. This one was proposed by Mr. Benner, so I will recognize him to speak to it.
Yeah, can you just scroll up maybe one row? Okay, thank you so much.
There we
Yeah,
go. That
so
captures all of it.
okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this is an intellectual property plank. It's quite similar to that which was introduced in 2020, so not 2022. That's 2 conventions ago. This is in relation to intellectual property, so no matter what position you take, and there are various positions on this in the party, it's nearly universally acknowledged that the government's handling of this has been stifling and ham-handed. Even objectivists I know that are kind of devout supporters of IP would kind of agree that the government manifestation of this in terms of policy has resulted in what ends up to be market monopolies, especially in things like pharmaceuticals and published works. So what this would do is create a new platform that makes clear that we don't view ideas as property, and we don't think those disputes should be resolved by government. It actually opens up a free market of any kind of dissemination of ideas. In addition, though, it also makes clear that we view fraudulent misrepresentation as a moral aggression against others. So we can't falsely represent ourselves as someone else to kind of consummate fraud. The benefits of this is it really solidifies our position on this for, in my mind, I think the first time ever. I'm sure Karen Ann or someone else could correct me if I'm wrong on that, but also differentiates us from the other 2 parties, both of which acknowledge intellectual property protections in various ways, and even considered a national security issue in some cases. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Benner. Mr. Secretary, a note in the chat, Mr. Bergman has stepped out and Mr. Matz will be taking his position for the rest of the meeting as alternate for Illinois.
I'm sorry, who is the primary?
It was Mr. Bergman for Illinois.
Mr. Matz is his replacement.
Mr. Matt.
That is M-A-T-T-E, correct?
M-A-T-T-E-S.
Yes, right, got it. All right, thank you.
Pronounced Mattis, Ken Mattis, thank you.
Alrighty, Mr. Ensdor.
Yes, I'd like to speak in favor of this. What, as libertarians, a core component of what we stand for is where we stand on property rights, which requires a clear understanding of what property is and what constitutes a legitimate property right. And as Mr. Benner said, the other two major parties, they wholeheartedly endorse IP protections. In the age of the internet, it's become very clear that that there are serious structural issues with IP, and if anything, I would argue that IP is an institutional violation of property rights, because it tries to enforce scarcity on that which is not scarce, which is ideas and information, and in doing so, enforces a claim of control over all physical media in existence from content creators, which creates conflict over scarce resources instead of solving them, which is the whole point of property rights. And I think that we should support it. So that's all I've got.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I appreciate the problem statement here, and I agree a lot that there's a lot of room for us to take a position on this that would be very attractive to voters if we talked about things like, you know, the classic examples of Disney keeping things on the books for 75 years. Those are clearly absurd examples that I think we could take a clear stance against. I know that this is an issue where there is a lot of debate in the party, and you know, even just recently, as I think about a year ago, the SOHO Forum had hosted a debate between libertarians on this, and there was a lot of division on that. Given that in mind, what the actual text here takes a very strong position on one side of that issue, which kind of does the opposite of what I would love to see in a plank, which is to bring the party together on the things we can definitely agree on, of that if we are going to have intellectual property rights, they should be limited to the purposes that people within a libertarian space would argue, that they protect people from fraud and theft, which is rightly represented here, but also from theft of ideas, of taking somebody else's content and stealing it from them and monetizing them, and the market consequences that has on creators. Libertarians should be very well aware that many people in the liberty space are content creators. And this is an issue even just in the past few days I've heard as content creators talk about AI, that many in the libertarian space have commented on this and don't share the view that ideas are not property, at least in the sense that this plank is trying to go, where there's no right to produce and monetize content. This is an issue that will be given a lot of visibility among content creators in the libertarian community if we pass a plank like this, and it will be viewed very negatively. So compared to other proposals that we would be having on this committee and consider in the top 6 spots, I just don't see this as a proposal that has such relevance and such importance to growing the party that it would merit a spot in the top 6. So I won't be voting for it on those grounds.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Secretary, Matthew Hartwig has entered as a guest.
Can you spell that name?
Matthew, last name Hartwig, Hartwig.
Got it. window, can you post the document location for where you're getting the language of each of these proposals?
They are in the proposal draft folder on the shared. Hang on one second, I'll put that in chat for you. Right, that's in chat for you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Barber.
Good evening, thanks. I guess at this point, I'm just going to ask the question how, excuse me, how this, how we're going to differentiate intellectual property from trademarks and patents. Does this specifically include both of those, or does it specifically exclude both of those? I'm not really too sure. Thanks.
That is a point of information, and I'm going to ask Mr. Benner if he could address that real fast.
Yeah, it's open-ended, but so it includes all of the above except for the fraud part. So we call out the fact that you can't just, say represent yourself as, for instance, the Libertarian Party if you're not the Libertarian Party. That's why we're saying that you can't falsely represent yourself. Even, I would extrapolate that to mean through trademark as well. But this is open-ended other than that. Thank you.
Mr. Choco had his hand raised.
I put it down.
Sorry. Mr. Brookbank.
I guess this would be a point of information also. Looking at this, personally, I believe that intellectual property is property. But let's say I write a song, and what's going to prevent somebody from using my song? In the wording here, it says that, that type of issue should be resolved according to principles of any contractual obligations between the parties involved. But what if I don't have a contract with a person and they just decide to use my song? How would that play out according to this plank?
Mr. Benner again.
Unless it involves like the song stored on a physical medium, it doesn't. The government doesn't get involved. You can disseminate it as much as you want. I'm a published author. I publish my works under Creative Commons. Everyone has the right to publish what I publish. That's the point of this. We don't believe that ideas are property. But you could say like, hey, if it was stored on a flash drive and someone steals your flash drive, that's your property. Can't do that.
I have a brief response real quick as well to answer Mr. Brooksbank's question before I make my general comments. It would be that like the plank already describes that if someone sorry, if someone tries to claim that it is their song, like their rendition, their publication, their recording, but versus the possession of said song on, say, your hard drive or type of thing, that would be a difference, being that I can't say this painting that I made of the Mona Lisa that I produced is I'm the original author, or I'm say the original, like I'm saying, like trying to remember who painted the guy who painted the Mona Lisa. And so that's difference.
But
Yes, you
if
get my
they,
point.
Excuse me. But
Go ahead.
If they just, let's say they take my song, they give me credit, they put in the credit, they use it as the theme song for a movie. but, and they put in the credits that, you know, it was written by Russell Brooksbank. I mean, it's still my song. They're making money off of it. And, but I don't have a contract with them. So so what you're saying is because, it's intellectual that it came out of my mind that, I shouldn't be paid for it?
Well, we're kind of stretching a little bit on the crosstalk. So let's try to keep that down so everybody else has a chance to speak. However, the points are decent. The points are good questions. Mr. Thompson?
Thanks. I seem to remember Stephen Kinsella brought this up at the last convention, maybe from the floor. And I don't know how that was resolved. We didn't hear it or it was voted down. And I think when we look at this plank, this is one of these aspirational planks because you would need constitutional amendments to void patent and copyright laws within the country. I mean, they are taken as rights and not as something that's legislatively handled, right? It is a right. So we would need constitutional change, and that's a pretty massive undertaking. So this is a plank that's an aspirational plank. But if anyone can remember, Secretary, I know you're on the line. What exactly happened with Kinsella's proposal? Maybe that would be valuable for this discussion.
McCarlow goes up next, so go ahead. Carlos, you're muted.
Yes, having trouble finding my mute button. Yeah, let me answer that first, and then I'll go on to my debate point. We didn't get to it. It was in the report. A different version of this was in the report, same idea, but we didn't get to it. So that would answer that. So I'd like to go through my points here. First, I'm going to start with I'm going to challenge those who claim that intellectual property is property. And I hope people don't take offense at this. I'm going to be somewhat strong. I would submit that you don't have a libertarian view of property. There's a lot of writing on this. What is property is rivalrous claims to scarce resources. Ideas are not scarce resources. If I sing your song, I do not diminish from your ability to also sing that song. Whether or not you desire to make money off of something or think you should be able to make money off of something does not make it property. That is not a libertarian view of property. What is property under a libertarian philosophy is very, very well flashed out. Again, it's claims to rivalrous, scarce resources, and so-called ideas do not fit into the objection, Mr. Chair. There's like all kinds of talk like going on that's interrupting.
I wasn't hearing anything.
If-
I was.
Somebody was
hearing some
unmuted.
echoes.
Okay, so I keep hearing, well, I want to make money and I think it's property. I haven't heard yet under the libertarian definition of property, how in the world it is property. In fact, you can monetize. I don't stop anybody from copying any of my YouTube videos. I'm also an author and I make money off of my work. We've had a similar plank in Colorado now for 6 years and hell hasn't frozen over. And in fact, I don't think anyone that I've talked to on the street who has read our platform has brought this up like an oh my god moment. So I think pushing the panic button is unnecessary. To answer legally the question about patents and trademarks, patents would most definitely be included. Trademark is a weird thing. Trademark at times is a claim of pure intellectual property, in which case anything that's just a mere idea that would fall under it. However, if you read the text of the thing that creates trademark, which is the Lanham Act, you will see that it's about fraud. It's not about a claim that you own an idea. It is I don't want to say corporate because it's not just corporations who could end it, but who can hold a trademark. But it is kind of like a business / commercial embodiment of identity theft. That is what trademark is about. It is not about claiming you own an idea. It's about false impersonation. 98% of the time, if you read what courts have said about the Lanham Act, it said that the core evil that the Lanham Act is concerned with is consumer deception, in which they want to buy from a certain person or entity or do commerce, because commerce is defined quite broadly, with a certain entity. Somebody shouldn't be able to hold themselves out as that entity and thereby potentially deceive the consumer. Just like you shouldn't be able to say on a can of, a can of some product that it's peanut free, when people who want something definitely without peanuts can be potentially deceived by it. So to answer the patent trademark things, in 98% of the cases, trademarks would not fall under this, but patents 100% of the time would fall under this. And another thing that would fall under in the area of copyright, somebody else had brought up, is if it's your song, people in general want to support creators. I think we're finding that out with so many big artists that just put things out there and say, pay what you want. So you can't go out there and say you are you're Nickelback, though that might be a plus if they might want the fraudulent Nickelback, but I'm just using that as a joke. You can't claim to be Nickelback and say this is that I am Nickelback and I wrote this song. While you could sell their song as somebody else, you just can't claim to be them. Because that would in fact be fraud. And to say that this is aspirational, there's a ton of our platform that is that. That's not an objection. Our platform's against eminent domain. Eminent domain's in the Constitution, and that's been part of our belief since 1972. So that's not an objection unless you're willing to gut like 50% of our platform. And in fact, the Supreme Court says you're not allowed to secede, and secession is in our platform. So saying that something is aspirational, I don't view as a valid objection. So, just saying somebody personally believes it's property is not a libertarian argument. I want to hear how it is rivalrous and scarce.
It wasn't an objection.
I'm done, by the way, Mr. Chair.
Alrighty, I put myself in the queue next. Then we'll get to Mr. Bowman and Mr. McCode. And then Mr. Brooksbank. Here's the situation from my perspective. And I have a little bit different nuanced perspective than a lot of people on this, partially because of what I do for a living and the fact that we have weird copyright rules involving computer software and the government. But ideas themselves, you really can't call them property, because while they're running around inside your head, they're confined to your head. Once you express them somehow, either by speaking them or by putting them to some type of media, whether it is writing it down, whether it's a recording, whether it's a word processor, a document like we have in front of us, some physical means, and I would include electronic as physical here because it is physically stored somewhere and it is electronic, even though it's physical. Once you're in that realm, then you're into physical property rights, and copyright and intellectual property fit in rather nicely. There's a lot of discussion about whether it is or whether it isn't, and I think that what's missing in that discussion is the nuance of when is it each. And I think that's the key point. a lot of what this plank talks about is disputes between inventors and creators and authors and so on. But those are all disputes because they have been put to a medium at that point. Da Vinci's Mona Lisa, to use a previous mention, was just an idea in Leonardo da Vinci's head until he pulled out that piece of wood and started painting. Now that thing has been reprinted who knows how many times over the years in various mediums, including now electronic ones. Because over time, that's what's become of it. That's Common Core, and that's public domain, and a few other details. We're not going into that here. The point of it is that once he put it from his head, from his mind, out in the world, that's where the intellectual property question comes into play. That's a key point. I'm not in favor of this. I'm not against it. I just want to point out that there's a little more nuance here that this does address a little bit, but I'm asking people to think about that a little bit. I have Mr. McCose, then Mr. Bowman, then Mr. Brooksbank, then Mr. Ensor. Go ahead, Mr. Bowman.
Said I'm next, or someone's ahead of me still?
You're next, sir. No, excuse me. Mr. McCose is next. I apologize. I have my order backwards. Mr. McCose.
Okay, I just wanted to bring up the comments. Someone previously said basically that this is not really topical to today's world. Well, Congress has been having discussions on IP because of generative image, things like Midjourney and ChatGPT, generative image processing, language learning modules. IP is relevant today. There are people that are, I have friends that have been giving congressional members, one of my friends is a staffer to Ted Cruz, just to flatly say that he's been giving him guidance, trying to give him guidance on when Congress is talking about these specific topics. They are trying to craft bills and regulate this specific era, even technology even further. And taking a stance is relevant to today because the tech sector, the people that are artists, all of these things, it is on their mind right now. I understand that people want to say that we really need something that panders to specific groups or whatever, but this is something that is core to our philosophy, that we don't own our ideas. We don't it's like, do we own this philosophy as we express it ourselves? When we express it ourselves, that is our own expression, but beyond that, once it's out in the world, we don't have really control of who hears it, how it's reinterpreted. And I think my point has kind of been made. Thank you.
If I unmute myself, Mr. Bowman, you're up.
Yeah, I'm just being polite, waiting to be called.
No,
okay,
you were up. I was unmuted by accident. My apologies. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I wish to propose an amendment, and I pasted it in the chat. And it would be to strike the clause within the sentence that says, we favor the repeal of intellectual property laws, and replace it with, we oppose the criminalization of so-called intellectual property theft. And I can
Mr. Bowman, I'm not seeing it in the. Oh, there it is. Never mind. Thank you. I'm sorry. I apologize for
been there a
say
while.
again. I was hiding up higher up. Okay, so
Yo,
I
there's
see what
a
you're
lot
asking.
under. Wow. Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Um,
I I've got it here. I just didn't see it the first time. Okay, so the motion is to amend to strike. We favor the repeal of intellectual property laws, which is right here. Bear with me. I will get this to make sense. And actually, no, I don't want to do that. What I really want to do is do this. And then I want to add in here. Pardon my belching, folks. I'm going to just copy and paste it directly in. Boom. And that part is going to be that. And hang on a second. I got to add a space. There we go. So that is the amendment. It is in order. But excuse me. Pardon me. So the amendment is to proposed amendment is to strike the words "we favor the repeal of intellectual property laws" and replace them with "we oppose the criminalization of so-called intellectual property theft." Mr. Bowman, do you wish to speak to your amendment?
Yes. I share the view with a couple of the people here that seem to have a problem with, well, if you do a lot of work to create something that is abstract, that somehow you can't make a living off that, and that you would need to, or maybe you can, but maybe someone else can make a living off what you invested in and what you work to create. I mean, sometimes it can involve a great deal of money, such as if you're doing a whole bunch of research and development for a new invention or a new pharmaceutical and so on. And on the other hand, we have this kind of thing where some people want to try to claim that a person who simply copies and shares something is stealing and is therefore a criminal equivalent to someone who breaks into a store and steals something off the counter. I think that, so this kind of is taking a middle ground. And the reason I'm putting it there is because, I mean, there is, and, you know, I came into libertarianism really through the objectivist vector. So in that, of course, you know, Ayn Rand being very strongly in favor of intellectual property, though, of course, John Galt enforced it his own way without the help of government. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think by saying we oppose criminalization, certainly I don't think anyone here thinks a person should be treated as a criminal for replicating someone else's property or product. But I do think a person who invests fortune and treasure into creating something, or a group of people who do that, and then find that after they do all that work, someone captures those that information and ends up profiting off it, and then they don't, after they're the ones who invested in it. I think they do have a legitimate civil beef that they should be able to, as long as we have government, be able to sue to recoup losses from that. Now, I'm not proposing that language in here because, of course, that presupposes the existence of a government. And I don't want to do that either. So I figured what this does is simply it's expressing opposition to criminalizing the reproduction of so-called intellectual property, but it's not putting a wall up really that we somehow have an objection to any type of civil action to try to recoup losses from someone else using your ideas.
Alrighty, Mr. Brooksbank, are you still your hand up for the main motion or for the amendment?
For the main motion, sir.
Alrighty, Ms. Harlos.
Okay, where Mr. Bowman had said it presupposes a state, I'd say the problem is that the amendment proposes is it's internally contradictory. If ideas are not property, then what? You think it's still okay to sue civilly? That means you are saying it's property. This is incoherent. You've written an incoherent statement, like a married bachelor. And what it presupposes, the second half presupposes that it's property. And the fact is, IP is not enforced through criminal law. It is enforced through civil courts. And so to say we oppose the criminalization of it is like saying, well, I oppose all of you in this room from sprouting monkeys out your butt and letting them fly around the room. Well, I don't think there's much chance of that happening because typically the average human being does not sprout monkeys out of their butt. And likewise, IP is not generally enforced through criminal laws. If you remember that lady, I'm sure someone will put it in chat, who got sued by some music companies through, was it LimeWire or something like that, for downloading songs. She wasn't, I don't think, threatened with jail, but it was a million, it was like a shit ton of money. It was a civil penalty. You either cannot own ideas, in which case, if you can, then it should be criminal to steal it. And if you can't, then it shouldn't be an issue at all. And I have yet in all of this to hear the libertarian argument other than it's not fair that I spent time on something and someone else profits from it. I have to say, too bad. It's not fair that I can't lose weight. And I spend a lot of time on trying to lose weight, and as I'm getting older, I can't. Lots of things in life aren't fair. Just because you spent time on it doesn't make it property. Ideas are not rivalrous, scarce resources, which is the libertarian definition of property. All the arguments I have heard are either not libertarian or based upon emotion. Thank you.
Mr. Shoko.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself there. So, I actually don't think I really need to speak on this anymore. However, I want to point out that the word "but" that appears immediately after the green highlighted text would need to be changed to "and." And I think that should be done as part of this amendment, if we can just pretend that it was offered that way. So yeah, that's all I have at this point.
Well, technically, a second level amendment is in order.
Sure, but I feel like it's pretty obvious that needs to be and I really don't want to spend the time on that second level amendment.
I agree.
I'm not going to offer that amendment. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, no, it's substantially, it's.
Mr. Mass, we'll get there. Is there an objection to changing the "but" to "and" just for purposes of proper grammar?
I have no right to, but I will just say, as somebody who helped write this with Dave, "but" was there on purpose, not.
Yeah. I'm thinking about it too, and I'm so sorry, guys. I've got to object.
With this amendment?
Well, it wouldn't belong with this amendment because it's outside the scope of this amendment. But just in general, the argument was made that can we just pretend it was written that way? And as somebody who wrote it, no, I'm not going to pretend it was written that way because it wasn't.
You wrote this amendment?
No, but that "but" has nothing to do.
The "but" doesn't work if this amendment passes. The "but" needs to be "and" if this amendment passes.
Talk, please. I think what's going on here is that the original intent of the amendment was to include the "but" in the stricken and the proposed the strike part, and it was not, and adding an "and" with the green part to replace it. That being said, Ms. Harlos's point about it being outside the scope of the amendment at this point is actually well taken, and it would require another amendment off of the main motion and not an amendment off of this amendment. So at the moment, I'm going to rule it out of order until we dispose of this amendment first. Is there any further debate on the amendment? Mr. Choco, is your hand up for the amendment, or was that to change the and and the but? Okay. Since there is objection to this amendment, then, and we have concluded debate, we will move to a vote on this issue. The proposed amendment is to strike the words "we favor the repeal of intellectual property laws" and replace with "we oppose the criminalization of so-called intellectual property theft." Mr. Secretary, whenever you're ready.
Alfstad,
No.
Barber,
No.
Benner,
No.
Bergman,
Bergman has
Bergman
left.
has expressed an absence. I'm prepared to vote when we get to the alternate.
forgot about that. Thank you. Bowman,
Yes. Yay.
Bushbank,
No.
Coco,
No.
Eiler,
No.
Zer,
No.
Johnson,
No.
Labrie,
No.
Leatherman,
No.
Mathews.
No.
I'm going to skip myself. Thompson,
No.
I'm going to vote nay. And Mr. Chair,
Mr. Matz first.
I'm sorry, Mr. Matt.
Yeah, Illinois votes no.
Chair is not voting.
All right, Mr. Chair, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 14 nay and 1 I think. Yes. And 1 not voting.
Confirmed. The amendment fails. Okay, we are back on the main motion, and I had Mr. Brooksbank and Mr. Ensor lined up for that. So, Mr. Brooksbank.
Yes, I just want to answer Karen Ann. It's rare because it came out of my mind and nobody else's. So that answers that part of that. But I thought that, libertarians also believe that, we were entitled to the fruits of our labor. And, mental work, creative work is still work. It's still labor. And people deserve the fruits of those labor. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd second those.
Mr. Mather, please not be inserting without being recognized. Mr. Ensor.
Ownership is a synonym for exclusive control, and it is not possible to control ideas and information and patterns to the exclusion of everyone else. A pattern of sounds, as in a song, a pattern of colors for a picture or a video, or a pattern of excuse me, a pattern of text for a book or a document or anything else, and saying that and trying to enforce exclusive control over those mediums imposes a a form of control on everyone else, which violates their own rights, their rights to self-ownership and to use their own property as they see fit. We do not believe that there is no such thing as any particular right to a certain level of profit for any particular action. You can certainly try to, you absolutely have the right to try to sell your services, such as getting a job, selling a product, but there is no such thing as a right to have people pay you for anything in particular. The use of IP, like I said before, it creates conflicts instead of solving conflicts, because of the aforementioned induction of trying to claim control over everyone else, and it induces artificial scarcity. A fairly particular case that I note is there was a lawsuit over somebody singing the happy birthday song. So if you want, as far as how wacky that can get, there are lawsuits to the tunes of, I think, billions of dollars as far as use of patents, or infringing patents, infringing, this design looks like how somebody else designed it. This sounds like something somebody else sounded. So, and that is a misallocation of resources that goes into government courts to litigate something when it could be used for further innovation and production. This really does cut to the core of what you think property is, because of course, if you think that there is a natural right to exclusively control the ideas that and information that you put out, then it would make sense that it follows from that you would think that those of us who think that there should not be IP protections would be advocating for something like communism. But again, that goes back to, do you believe it's property or not? And it is, I would argue it is not. And I have yet to hear a convincing argument as to why it is. It's mostly been begging the question and simply asserting that it is. If your business model, the basis by which you claim the right to make money is, if you say that the only way that you can think of to do that is by use of IP and enforcing that, what that means is you can only conceive of a business model that is dependent on government monopoly force in order to be profitable. And we strongly oppose the idea that any business model that is based on government monopoly force is legitimate. I could go on, but I think I've belabored this enough.
I would just like to echo what Mr. Luke Enzor just said as well, and add on to and respond to Mr. Brooksbanks when he brought up about people's ability to gain the fruits of their labor. And so we're only entitled to when we produce our labor and bring it to market. We are only able in that instance to gain said profits. We are, once if it is being distributed, say creative works being distributed, we are only able in that instance when it is released to even able to control how much profits we may be able to, like we said, like it is mentioned, between the contractual obligations, which would be based upon the artist and the distribution company to make it so that they have all the deals necessary so that they will actually have full protection, have full ability to actually gain the profits when it's released to the market. They already have all these the distributors already have all of the retailers lined up who are going to purchase those things. And yes, I understand that like when books are put into Barnes and Noble, there's a chance that they won't, they'll get money taken back from them when someone returns the thing. But that's part of the contract. It's up to the individual when they release it to the market to make sure that they are getting the best deal when it is being released to the market. And that's the only point in which that they should be able to actually make that point. Beyond then, it's kind of your SOL. That's just how the markets work.
Alrighty, I had Mr. Brooksbank in the queue, but he's already spoken twice, so I'm going to ask this question to the committee first. Is there anybody who has not yet spoken on this who wishes to do so? Okay, Mr. Brooksbank.
Thank you. I'm at this point going to propose an amendment. I want to strike everything after resolved.
Including the word resolved?
After resolved, strike everything, and then it's placed, put in civil court.
Hold on. I had the wrong button. I'll fix the highlight in a second. Alrighty, the amendment is to strike the words according to principles of any contractual obligations between the parties involved and replace with the words in civil court. Mr. Brooksbank, do you wish to speak to your motion? To your amendment, excuse me.
Yes, people are entitled to the fruits of their labor. If they write a book, so no one should be able to copy that book down and then resell it, or or if I write a song, someone shouldn't be able to use it as a theme song in their movie without my permission. And again, this does not criminalize intellectual property theft, but it does allow for us to seek restitution and within the civil courts, and without actually having to have a contract with every human being on the planet. Thank you.
Carlos.
I'm going to say once again, it presumes it's property. Assertions just keep being made that someone shouldn't have get to. No, you're not entitled to profit or claim to profit from every single action of your body. I could open my back window right now, and if I had a wonderful voice, but I don't, but let's pretend like I do, I start singing opera out my back window, and other people hear it and enjoy it. I don't, because, hey, I put labor into it, and you enjoyed it, and maybe you started humming along, that I'm entitled to money. Again, I'm going to go back to, I am going to insist upon the rigorous libertarian definition of property is not merely that you put labor into it. That's almost like the labor theory of value. The only things that can be owned are scarce and rivalrous. That is the purpose of libertarianism in that realm, to resolve disputes on scarce, rivalrous resources. Things that are non-rivalrous, there is no reason to even have anything for it. To say that it should be resolved in civil court, again, is presupposing that ideas are property, which just makes an incoherent plank. I can respect someone who just disagrees. So let me put, like, everyone's entitled to their opinion. as I said, I don't think it's a libertarian point of view, but I certainly respect everyone's right to their opinion. But just vote the thing down rather than trying to create a jumbled mess that is just internally absolutely inconsistent. So, that's all I have to say. There's already been well, actually I have one other thing to say. It was said in chat, there's been empirical studies that people can still make money without IP. And in fact, I would say that IP is actually what is stifling innovation. And Stefan Kinsella makes an absolutely great case for that. And you want to talk about operating against your own self-interest. You know how much labor of his life he dedicated into becoming an intellectual property attorney, only at the end of that journey of probably hundreds of thousands of dollars realizing he didn't even believe in it. And it's like a lawyer I once worked with who went to school to be a constitutional law attorney and said she all of a sudden sat there in the middle of the class and looked around, and it was like Jesus spoke to her, and she goes, "Oh my God, this is all just bullshit." Does anyone else understand? She's looking around the room. This is all just bullshit. So if you just don't agree for whatever reason, some of us can think it's not libertarian. I'm sure you'll live. We have these opinions. We all love each other. Don't make an incoherent plank. Just vote against it. Thank you.
We have Mr. Choco, then Mr. Montoni, then Mr. Brooksbank. Mr. Choco.
Thank you. So with respect to this amendment, I don't think it really, the plank doesn't really make sense. It says up top, we believe, or we favor the repeal of intellectual property laws. And then it would say, but if you have a dispute, resolve it according to the law, which is essentially how I read in civil court. So that doesn't really make sense to me. So I don't support the amendment. I also don't support it on the grounds that it's just kind of it doesn't really mesh with basic libertarian thought. It says if you have a problem, run to government, or even if it's private, run to court to resolve it. That's kind of our last resort thing, is going to court. The other language of resolving it according to contractual obligations is much more in line with general libertarian thought on how to resolve differences. So I would oppose this amendment.
Ready. I had Mr. Montoni next.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to oppose this amendment as well because it says in civil court. Well, then guess who runs this? Guess how unfair they are. So I have to vote against this particular amendment in civil court. Thank you.
Ready. Mr. Brooksbank, then Mr. Bowman.
Well, actually, I'm going to lower my hand.
Okay, Mr. Bowman.
In a way, this proposed amendment was stating, and what was kind of in the back of my mind, though I don't know if I would have deleted the other stuff, but I probably would have included it originally when I proposed my amendment. I'm not supporting it now. After hearing the conversation and Luke Ensor bringing up the point that really we're talking about people making a business model that depends on the existence of the state, and me realizing there are alternative business models, and, going back to my Randian roots, John Galt had basically a self-destruct tool inside of his energy machine, his greatest invention, that no one could take that information without his permission, but not requiring any government. I think creative means of making money and of protecting one's claim to be able to use an idea to make money really calls on a little more creativity. I somewhere amounts to intellectual sloth, and I think perhaps I was guilty of that. And now that I'm looking at this, and I actually had avoided putting the phrase civil court in there originally because I was trying to not, what is it called, the Dallas Accords or whatever. I was trying not to impose something that directly called for the existence of the state. But this does, which means I probably would have even objected to it at the beginning of the conversation. So, for those reasons, I oppose it. I don't think it's going to do any better than my idea did earlier.
Ms. Carlos.
Hold on. Okay. Yeah, the thing about civil court there too, even presupposing the state, what if they don't want to resolve it in civil court? What if they decide they'd prefer binding mediation or binding arbitration? There are other, what if they want a duel? I mean, there's lots of other ways. They want to play rock, paper, scissors. I mean, there's lots of other ways. Now we're saying that they have to resolve it in court. Now, I'm going to say something that's probably going to offend some people, and that's okay. Like, as you know, I am always so worried about offending people. When the state monopolizes rights enforcement, I think the libertarian distaste for enforcing their rights through the way it's been monopolized is an internal self-destruct mechanism. Liberty is not a suicide pact. I can tell you, if I ever got raped, my ass is going to the cops, and I ain't gonna feel a libertarian pang of regret about that, because that's the system that we're forced under. So I really wish we would stop with some of these sound bites that, oh, running to the state, the state has forced that onto you. Your hands are clean. You could sleep with a clean libertarian conscience. If someone commits fraud upon you or steals from you or violates your rights in some other way, you go and try to enforce it yourself, your ass is going to be thrown in jail. That's what the state has forced upon us. So I think you can go to court with clean hands, but some people agree amongst themselves that they think the judges in their county suck, and they'd rather agree upon a binding arbiter.
Alrighty. Thank you, Ms. Harless. We are at 9:54, just as a time reminder. I was going to speak on this, but Ms. Harlow stole my thunder with the arbitration and mediation arguments, so I have nothing further to say. So is there any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, we will move to a vote on the amendment, because it's clear there is objection. Mr. Secretary, whenever you're ready.
Alstead,
No.
Barber,
I'm gonna abstain. I can't make up my mind.
Benner,
No.
Bergman, or I'm sorry, Matt.
I will pass at this time. Please come back to me.
Bowman,
No.
Brooksbank,
Yes.
Coco,
No.
Eiler,
No.
Enzer,
No.
Johnson,
No.
Bree,
No.
Leatherman,
No.
Bose,
No.
Thompson,
No.
and I'm gonna vote no, Mr. Chair.
Matt's first, he passed.
Yeah,
No.
for Matt's, Mattis actually is my last name. I'm gonna record abstention. I abstain.
Apologies, sir, for mispronouncing your name. Chair is not voting.
Okay. Mr. Matz, I'm sorry, Mattis, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, thank you. Kenneth Mattis, abstain.
Okay, and do we have it spelled right in the minutes?
Mattes.
Okay.
Mike? Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, Mr. Chair, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 nay. I guess I should have done the ayes first. 1. I see 1 aye, 2 abstentions, and 1 not voting.
Confirmed. So by 112-1, the amendment fails. We are at 9:57. We are back on the main motion. Is there any further debate on the main motion? Hearing none, we are ready to move to a vote on it.
All right, you're gonna have to give me a minute here. I'm still working on the last one.
No worries.
All right, just to remind the body, would you mind saying what we're voting on?
I will do that. The vote is on the main motion to add this intellectual property plank. I will read it off primarily for the recording. 2.x, section to be determined, intellectual property. As we believe that ideas are not property, comma, we favor the repeal of intellectual property laws, but oppose fraudulent misrepresentation about goods and services. Disputes between inventors, creators, authors, artists, businesses, and other such entities could be resolved according to principles of any contractual obligations between the parties involved.
And as a point of order, can I ask what is the
Go ahead.
current plank? And can we have the current plank
This is
text
a new,
if there is any?
this is a new plank. There is no current text.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
All right, Alstead,
Aye.
Barber,
Sometimes it sucks being at the beginning of the alphabet. Um, I'm going to say I.
Benner,
Yes.
Mattis,
No.
Bowman,
Yes, yay.
Brooksbank.
No.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Nay.
Thank you.
No.
Thank you. Coco,
Yes.
Eiler,
Yes.
Penzer,
Yes.
Johnson,
No.
Labrie,
Yes.
Leatherman,
Yes.
McCose,
Aye.
Thompson,
Yes.
and I'm gonna vote aye. Mr. Seebeck?
Chair is not voting.
All right, Mr. Chair, I see 12 aye. Three nay. And 1 not voting.
Confirmed. The amendment passes. Excuse me, the motion passes. I'm sorry. That is 12-3-0-1. Pass it. Alrighty, we are at 10:02. We have hit our break time at the end of this plank. So real quickly, Mr. Benner.
I was just gonna call for orders of the day. So yeah.
Oh, well, we're at orders of the day, which is adjournment.
Yeah.
So just a quick announcement, we will reconvene with our next meeting, same bat time, same bat channel next week, Tuesday, 8 o'clock Central, and whatever that translates to for the rest. Please remember to make sure you set your clock back or forward, excuse me. Coming up, I believe it's this weekend. And if I'm wrong, then the weekend after that. In any case, thank you all. It's been a good discussion tonight. Two major ones that were very, I don't want to say controversial, but animated, definitely. And good discussion, deliberation. I appreciate it. Thank you all. Mr. Montoni, do you want to stick around and go over the minutes real fast before we get out?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.